Okay, I see it's 4 o'clock, so I'm going to call the Select Board meeting of November 16th, 2020 to order. We are being video conferenced and recorded. So I will ask the clerk to open by calling the roll.
Ms. Escobedo,
Present?
Ms. Hotchkiss,
Aye, here.
Mr. Johnson,
Present.
Ms. Ackerman,
Present.
and myself, Ms. Bates, present.
Thank you. The consent agenda reads minutes to approve for October 26, 2020, and the town accountant warrants for November 12th, 2020. Do I hear a motion?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. And so will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Escobedo,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Ms. Ackerman,
Aye.
Ms. Hotchkiss,
Aye.
and myself, Ms. Bates. Aye.
Okay. And that's unanimous and the chair so declares. The town manager's report.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Just briefly, a couple of quick items. We did receive our first reimbursement for the CARES Act program. It was about just over $1 million. And so actually, since Bob and Ed are here, I can see we did include in that for reimbursement some funding for Minuteman as well for some supplemental funding. A couple of grants we're working on. Marsha Rasmussen is taking lead on working on another round of grant applications with the town of Sudbury. We had been in a partnership with them called Making the Connection about really regional commuter transportation. Obviously, those are all kind of destabilized, but now we're working on a program to basically contract with taxi services for on-demand rides for people who may have that need. And then she's still helping coordinate applications for the Community Development Block Grant, CDBG, COVID, Small Business Assistance Fund. And speaking of small business assistance, in part through the Economic Vitality Committee and also in part through Concord Together, Jennifer Schuneman from Voyager Press, who's on both of those committees, her company produced a holiday shopping guide that's being sent to all Concord homes. And something that I think is just the community should just be so proud of. A rallying cry went out for sponsorship. So the cost for the advertisement on small businesses who may already be struggling would be reduced. And the town was proud to be a part of that effort. We pledged a matching grant that got up to $2,500, and that got vastly exceeded. And so the private fundraising was able to 100% offset the production cost of the holiday shopping guide. So really a tremendous achievement for the business community being supported by other folks privately. And so that'll go out. Like I said, we took a full page ad to advertise BD Center and a couple of town services, but it's a beautiful magazine, and like I said, if you get it, it focuses on many of the local businesses and ways to shop local in the holiday season, which I've reported many times here is many of those businesses really see it as really key to making sure that they can make it into 2021. So I hope everybody takes a chance to take a look at the holiday shopping guide and shop safely. So there's also, I think, it was last week or the week before Kate was on talking about White Pond and the updates on that planning process. There was a survey that went out to get community feedback on some of the plans. They've got about 300 responses so far, which I think is actually a very good number for something that is not a community-wide asset. The survey is open for the entire community. There was a news and notices sent out about it, so people can either go to the White Pond page on our website or go through news and notices to find a link to the survey. I believe it is still open, but that feedback will be great for guiding future plans on White Pond. And then finally, I just want to say thank you to the residents who very generously delivered flowers to our police and fire departments on Friday. It was greatly appreciated by those departments and on their behalf. Thank you. Any questions? Or anything going, any other stuff that I missed, maybe?
Jane?
Stephen, you mentioned and I'm assuming it's because of the many changes during or as a result of the pandemic in the transportation, the state transportation opportunities. But you mentioned that Marcia was working with Sudbury on a grant application, which is now, which now equals taxi services. Is there any way that we can incent that to be a zero carbon or electric taxi? In other words, because one of the ways that we've approached all of our transportation goals has been under our Green Communities efforts and as part of our sustainability work. It would be great to have that also tied into this effort.
I can certainly ask that question. I think it's really working with existing companies who I'm sure are going to use their existing fleet. The companies have been actually identified. And so I don't necessarily think it's going to be an open call, but I can check on that.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, Terry.
Yes, I did see the holiday shopping guide, and it is beautiful. Excellent job by Jennifer and everybody. I also have a question about the grant. I'm thinking there's 3 separate grants, and maybe I'm confused, and you can enlighten me on this. There's this Making the Connection grant with the taxis, and I attended a meeting on that over a year ago, and I'm glad to see that that's going forward. And what I'm trying to figure out is, I think that sounds separate from another grant that we were working on for our shuttle bus route, and then maybe another grant for Crosstown Connect. So what I'm trying to figure out is, are these 3 separate programs? Are some of them related? And maybe the Transportation Advisory Committee could look at them all and.
Well, they are separate.
Okay.
And eventually I think all of them will be discussed at the Transportation Advisory Committee, but I can just, so Making the Connections was a sort of a planning exercise. The grant we're working, and I only mentioned Making the Connections because it was the establishment of this structural partnership between Concord and Sudbury and a few other communities. The grant we're looking at now is it's the COVID-19 taxi, livery, and hackney transportation partnerships. That's really specific for now. There was a shuttle, a local commuter shuttle grant that we received. I think we had reported a few weeks ago that the grant was actually taken back by the state because we weren't able to move forward. We weren't able to move forward because of COVID-19, and I think that the state's priority shifted on that as well.
And which one was that?
I don't really. I think it was another MAPC grant, but it was Marcia presented on it, I think, some months ago here, and I don't remember the exact name, but it was for like I said, I think tying commuter locations like the train stations and things like that in Concord. That was a Concord grant. We are also part of a Volpe Center project that I think is federal grant funded, and that's a partnership with the National Park Service and Lexington, and so that is still ongoing. We were trying to create linkages between our local commuter shuttle grant program and the Volpe Center project to try and create, so we wouldn't have closed loop, transportation. All of that has been somewhat destabilized. This Volpe Center project they're gonna finish the process. It was a massive amount of work in a much broader scope than even the grant that the state took back from us. And the report will be finished. It remains to be seen what we're going to be able to take away from that report in the short run during the pandemic. So yeah, there's a lot of separate activities, but when we talk about them, we always try and find ways to link those things together. And again, I think in the pandemic, it's hard to do some of that, but hopefully next year we come out of this, we'll be back to trying to rebuild, instead of rebuilding the existing commuter patterns, pick up where we left off and see if we can create different alternatives before people get back in the habit of being in their cars.
Okay, thank you. I guess I'm really happy to see all these different initiatives. And I'd like to request if we could have an agenda item sometime in the next few months to just spend 10 minutes or so going through all these different initiatives so that we can get up to speed as a board. Because it is one of our big goals of transportation. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for the town manager? All right. My comments will be brief. I just want to thank the Public Ceremonies and Celebration Committee for making their adaptations for Veterans Day services last week to minimize the any kind of public gathering for the event, and to also they did reach out to MN and the media to have that taped, and it was shown for quite a while during Veterans Day. So thank you to them, for both of those groups, for making that possible. And the other comment I would make is that I believe some of us received notice that the CMLP has purchased their first hydro electric power contract. And that is sure to help the town in terms of reaching its sustainability and energy goals. So we were pleased to see that. And the one,
It indicates that I think that's the largest of its kind, certainly in New England. It's certainly New England history. But I thank you for. I should have mentioned that. Thank you for covering for me there once again. But no, that's something that is I think it's lost in the headlines in the times we're in. But that's a really significant achievement in terms of advancing our climate change goals.
yes, and a consortium of municipal light plants made that possible, which made it, well, I think the largest purchase. So, and then one quick thing, and it has to do with the organization of our agenda today. We do, I understand that Dr. Boquillian, if he's here, has some constraints on his time. So I'm going to ask that that agenda item be taken out of order as we get to that. All right. Moving on to, I think the public hearing should not take a long amount of time, so I'm going to keep with the agenda on that item. Moving to a public hearing for the application by National Grid for grant of location to install and maintain approximately 2173 feet of 12-inch gas main on Walden Street. Is the representative from National Grid here?
Hi, good afternoon.
Okay, good. So I'll ask our clerk to open the public hearing.
Susan, you're on mute.
I apologize. Move to open the public hearing for application by National Grid for grant of location to install and maintain approximately 2,173 feet of 12-inch gas main on Walden Street.
Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Escobedo,
Aye.
Ms. Hotchkiss,
Aye.
Ms. Ackerman,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
and myself, Ms. Bates. Aye.
That's unanimous, and the chair so declares. Ms. Mulroney, would you like to present this application? And if we have someone here from CPW also, okay, but Ms. Mulroney, go ahead.
Thank you. National Grid respectfully requests your consent to install and maintain approximately 2,173 feet, more or less, of 12-inch gas main in Walden Street, Concord, from the Lincoln Town Line, all of which is to replace and abandon the existing 8-inch undersized section of main in Walden Street and Concord Road in Concord, which is, the reason they're replacing it is there's a bottleneck. The main is just undersized, and they'd like to, increase the size so that none of your constituents or our customers are ever inconvenienced with poor pressure.
All right, thank you. I see we have Stephen Dokran and Justin Richardson here. Would either of you like to make a comment? We have seen the documentation with all your recommendations.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm Steve Dokran, Town Engineer. We did send in that letter, as you may. We reviewed the plans, and the plans are consistent with what we need for the design and layout. We would recommend that the petition be approved, but all the conditions that we listed be part of that approval.
All right, thank you. Any other further comments from CPW? If not, Jeremy, I assume we have all the paperwork in order, correct?
That is correct, yes.
All right, thank you. I'll open it up for comments from the board.
Susan? I just want to say, I thought this was a very comprehensive and understandable plan, and it was reflects a whole lot of work that the DPW put in to protect the town. So thank you.
Linda, if I can
Yes.
join in. I agree that CPW has certainly put in a lot of time on this, and I appreciate Mr. Dukran and Mr. Richardson's time and expertise on this. I do want to make sure that before the board votes, we have some assurance that all of the conditions will be met. What I still don't quite understand, I understand that there's a bottleneck, but I also understand that the expansion of this main is to serve residents on the other side of Route 2. So I'm wondering who the customers are that are at greater risk of or need for this, for the new pipeline. And I continue to be concerned, and having seen other previous proposals and discussions at Public Works, why the abandoned gas main could not be removed. It's certainly a priority for the town to have infrastructure that's no longer being used to be removed. So I guess it's two questions. It's capping it or leaving it available to be. Well, capping it it seems like a compromise, not the first choice. But I'm also very curious as to beyond the bottleneck of need here, it's an expansion, and the expansion therefore would indicate to me future customers.
Ms. Mulroney, are you prepared to answer that?
Well, first of all, I want to address about the removal of the existing 8-inch coated steel line there. National Grid tries to minimize the work in the roads. So by doing that, you'd have the roads closed longer, and it's not their policy to do it anyway. And it's a state policy. We follow the guidelines from the state. But also as far as feeding in the pressure, yes, this is in conjunction with the town of Lincoln, and it's both towns. It's to support their infrastructure that's already existing. It's not just for maybe developments that have been built or homes that have already been built. It's the usage of the product. They want to add it. To increase the coated steel 8-inch, to get rid of that and replace it with the 12-inch.
So I understand the replacement, the physical infrastructure. What I'm questioning, because we have certainly a lively discussion in Concord about not expanding new gas in Concord. So that's where I'm asking who the customers are and whether this is consistent with Concord's current.
No, this isn't for a direct customer. No, this is just to support the gas system. if anything, it's always better to have more than, say, everybody at Thanksgiving, everybody's now home, they're not visiting, everybody, and it's a cold day, turns on the ovens to cook, and then they have the heat on. And if the pressure drops, this line is an old line. It was probably before new development had taken place in Concord and in Lincoln.
So this is a public safety issue? Is that what I'm understanding?
No, it's just National Grid is being progressive, and they'd like to keep the line. They'd like to increase the line that's already there, so they don't have any issues later of the customers calling and saying that they have no pressure, no gas.
Terry.
Yeah, I kind of share Jane's question, and I also have two other questions. But if I read the area right, I don't think there's any residents in that area. I think that's where the old landfill is and the Walden Pond Reservation. So I'm trying to figure out, I'm not sure there is an issue about Thanksgiving or pressure dropping in homes. So that's my first question.
Well, oh, go ahead.
My other questions are, I think the Public Works Commission, staff, a tremendous amount of work, and I'm wondering if the Public Works Commission makes a recommendation on this. And finally, what if the project is not done? Are there any, well, you said pressure might drop. Maybe the heat won't work as well. Is there any other safety ramifications?
None that I'm aware of. No, there's safety issues. No, it's just to keep, and I know what you're saying, there's nothing in the immediate area of it, but this is feeding other mains in your residential areas. So it's like bringing it in to other residential and commercial businesses so that they have the right pressure and they have enough of it.
Hey, Mary, this is Rob from Grid. Do you want me to add a little bit to some of your commentary?
Sure. Yes, perfect.
So this is at least partially, it's a reliability project. The existing main that's present in that area was installed, I believe, in like the 1940s. So when we talk about expansion, I guess you kind of have to be careful because it's relative. So it's not currently serving the need that is currently there. It is undersized. The project is a gas system is not just like, with lines of these diameters, it's not just that it affects one customer on one part of town, but not another. It's a system. So the concern here is that on the very coldest of days, where you have ambient temperatures below 32 degrees, where many people are heating their homes with natural gas, that would impact the ability to reliably provide gas to our customers in both Concord, Lincoln, Wayland, and Sudbury. And that's existing customers, not just customers that may also come online in the future.
Okay, thank you. Susan.
I just have a follow-up question to that. I'm looking at the map. So on this side of Route 2 that goes into Fairhaven Hill Road and Arena Terrace, that's on the same side of Route 2 as your main is, although it's going down 126. And my question is, if that's going to help increase pressure, that particular neighborhood right at the junction of Fairhaven Hill and Arena Terrace has some significant gas leaks that have been there for years. And I'm wondering, from a safety standpoint, if the pressure goes up, what happened? What's the risk?
For the area you're speaking of in particular, there shouldn't be any risk because they're different pressure systems. This pressure system is more of a feeder system, so it provides gas to larger areas, and then we have regulator stations that cut that pressure down and deliver it to residential customers, of which there would be at least one of those in between this current system and the areas that you're talking about. We don't have any direct customers off this line in particular. It gets cut and then fed out to other customers.
Okay, thank you.
All right. If there are no,
Can I ask one quick follow-up?
very quickly, because we
Okay.
need,
Do we have an accurate map and a plan for the gas leaks in Concord and a plan for how and when they're going to get fixed?
you're asking the National Grid representatives?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, so gas leaks are mandated by the state that we review grade 3s, grade 2s, 2As, and 1s. And we have to comply with business districts, and we have to do walking surveys and so forth. So they are monitored all the time, and we have a time limit that we need to repair them based on the time that we find them. Obviously, we say anytime anyone smells gas, please call it in and it will be addressed and graded. And I'm not certain, but I have heard that in 2021, National Grid will be having their leaks actually live, so anybody can look at them online.
Right.
And hi, this is David Waterfall. I'm an attorney for National Grid, and I'd like the opportunity, if I could, to just address a few of these conditions. We do have some major concerns about a few of them.
Okay.
Thank you. The first one references a leak-prone pipe statute. This is a pretty unprecedented condition I would see in a grant of location. It's referencing some statute that has to do with a program that's administered by the Department of Public Utilities, which regulates public utilities like National Grid. I can represent, if there's any sort of question, that this project has nothing to do with the leak-prone pipe project under this statute that's referenced in the first condition, chapter 164, section 145. So we're a little puzzled as to why this would be referenced here. It's, again, a state program, doesn't have anything to do with local grants of location from municipalities. So I think it's irrelevant to the proceedings today. The other thing I'd like to mention is this life cycle fee. It's condition number 6. This is something that does not exist anywhere else in the state. And the Supreme Judicial Court, the highest court in Massachusetts, has reviewed a fee just like this from the city of Newton and held that it is inconsistent with state law, and it's simply not authorized by municipalities. I'd be happy to expand on that. Essentially, the city of Newton tried to do the same thing, a fee that's imposed to address the diminished future value of the road. And the Supreme Judicial Court basically said in very clear terms that such a fee is just inconsistent with state law because we are exclusively regulated by the DPU. By statute, we're required to, anytime we open a road, to put it back in the condition we found it. So that's what we're doing in this case. It's going to be a curb to crown paving. But essentially, there's a lot of language in these SJC cases that this type of fee is simply not authorized by municipalities. So I would strongly urge the board not to adopt that condition. Basically, the SJC said that the only fee that can be imposed for a road opening permit is simply the administrative fee to cover the town's time in terms of reviewing and issuing the permit, the administrative costs in doing that. But we're not responsible for maintaining the road in perpetuity and compensating the town for any sort of diminished future value. We're not responsible for maintaining the road in the future. So again, it's been struck down by the SJC. This is a pretty unprecedented fee. It's not imposed on any public utilities anywhere else in Massachusetts. So I would strongly urge the board not to adopt that. I understand the logic behind it. It's just simply illegal. The other thing.
Mr. Waterfall, if I may ask you, is the head since I know this has been in the works for some time in terms of discussion between National Grid and the department, are they aware of your objection to these two particular conditions prior to coming in today's meeting?
Yes. Well, first of all, we brought it up at the very beginning of the process, and they indicated that they weren't interested in imposing it. I've been told by parties that the town has brought this fee up with other parties over time, and basically everyone's pushed back and they haven't imposed it. What we did talk about was a dispute about whether we were required to fill the pipe with anything. And, we made a very strong argument that that's simply not required and it would be inconsistent with state law. And so we were told that they were no longer going to require that, which is a good thing. But when we got a copy of these proposed conditions and it had this life cycle maintenance fee, that's the first time that we were told really that they were actually going to go ahead and try to impose this on us.
And
so it came as a bit of a surprise. But
and when did you receive that?
A couple of weeks ago, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So but you haven't gotten back to them subsequently?
Well, at the beginning of this whole project, well, I should say for a previous project.
Yeah, but not since receiving that notice of the condition.
No, that's correct. They were well aware of our position, and it's a position that's we've informed the town of in previous projects too, and they backed off in terms of imposing it. So we didn't feel that this would come up again. So we're disappointed to see that.
Okay. Would Mr. Dukran or Justin like to respond?
Yeah, yes, thank you, Chair. I will respond. Let me take the first condition first. We had engaged an attorney when Attorney Waterfall responded to our original set of conditions going back several months. And it had to do with a number of things that similar to what we have in our comment letter. And so the condition number one came from our attorney, who said the idea behind it is that National Grid cannot try to recover costs for replacing or for removing the existing line. That's the whole point about it. Now, I cannot explain exactly what's required by law, as Mr. Waterfall presented. He alluded to some other type of situation where it's a leak-prone pipe. We're just going by the guidance given to us by our attorney. And so I think that condition should stay. All it's saying is that they cannot file with the DPU to recover costs for removing the pipe.
All right.
So regarding the life cycle maintenance fee, our original letter, and I can tell you exactly when we sent that out, and Attorney Waterfall as well as the National Grid's people have been aware that we've been requesting life cycle maintenance fees, and I'm talking about months ago. The only response that the only issue that they had a problem with was the filling of the pipe. And as I said earlier, that's why we engaged an attorney, because we thought it was necessary to fill the pipe properly because of the size of it. It can collapse in the future, causing problems in the street. But we did not get any feedback regarding the life cycle maintenance fee. Now, we understand, previous projects, there were a lot of back and forth regarding life cycle maintenance fees. And there are two pieces of that. One is a life cycle maintenance fee for the new pipe. And in previous projects, there was a request for a life cycle maintenance fee as a surrogate fee for keeping the old pipe should there be a need to remove the pipe in the future, that fee was supposed to be used. There were a lot of, as I said, back and forth back then, but when we first sent out our letter on this project, there were no problems. At least we didn't get any feedback from National Grid regarding these fees. Since we have only presented one fee, the life cycle maintenance fee for the new pipe. like we collect from everyone who's digging in the streets, other utility companies, other private entities. Once they cut our street, there's a deterioration associated with that cut, and the fee's been structured. It's been approved by this board, and that's why we have it as a condition.
Thank you very much.
May I respond to that?
Yes.
Thank you. So I understand the rules for private parties and the rules for public utilities are very different because private parties aren't regulated by the DPU. We are exclusively regulated by the DPU. In this case that I cited, this Boston Gas Company versus City of Newton, it's an SJC case. It's in black and white. It says, imposing a cost on the plaintiff based on the reduction in street life caused by the excavation is inconsistent with the statute. It's in black and white. It couldn't be any clearer. So it may very well be a valid fee for private parties, but for public utilities, it's inconsistent with the regulatory scheme that's been set up by the DPU. As for that first condition, the cost recovery process is handled by the DPU. It's a completely state process, and cities and towns have no role in that. So for a condition to be inserted into a grant of location, first of all, it would be unenforceable. The DPU wouldn't enforce it, but it's completely regulated by the DPU. So again, it's, I don't know what conversations were had with the town's attorney, but it's just not reflective of what the actual process is for recovery of costs in the state ratepayer process.
Mr. Dukran, would it be helpful to you if Attorney Waterfall put his objections in writing and sent them to you, and that this hearing be continued to a later date?
That'll be fine with us. The schedule is ready theirs. They want to move on this project. They want to do winter construction. If they disagree with what we're asking, you can move the hearing to some other time.
All right, I'm going to, Jane?
I was just going to say I support that. I don't think that this is the board at which we should be changing the recommendations of our own Public Works Department.
Correct. All right. So do I hear? Let's see. So I've made that request, and you've heard that request, Mr. Waterfall. So can you comply with that within a reasonable time here?
We can certainly get the comments to the engineering department. I guess my concern is how long this would be delayed, because again, we've had the application with the town for several months, and the town attorney has had a chance to look at it. So there's been plenty of time.
I would hope that everyone would act, given the time that's already been involved and the amount of work and effort that's already gone into this. I would hope that people would respond to this as quickly as possible. So if you could get your comments in writing to DPW promptly, I'm sure they will proceed promptly as well. Mm-hmm. And then we will make every endeavor to reschedule as quickly as we can.
Mm-hmm. Would it be possible to be on the agenda for next week?
I'll commit to the fact that we will expedite this as quickly as we can.
I do want to, Linda, if I may, I just,
yes.
I do want to comment though that the conditions were drafted and I believe sent back to National Grid sometime like a few weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And so this isn't just fall out of the sky tonight. And so I think Attorney Waterfell's comments are points are well taken, but the urgency shouldn't be on us now. There's been a lot of time to review, and he's right that there were some conditions early on that were objected to, but Steve is 100% correct. We did acquiesce on some of those, but not the life cycle maintenance fee that we do believe to be in order. And there's been a lot of discussion, I think, over the past few weeks with certainly the operational level with National Grid. I don't know if they haven't made it to Attorney Waterfell or not, but like I said, this isn't something this isn't a sneak attack by the town. This has been something that's been talked about a lot.
Yeah, and I don't mean to suggest that at all. I think the point that I'm trying to make is that this is a decision, this is an approval that's made by the Board of Selectmen, not the town engineer. And to the extent that there are suggestions from the engineer that are just clearly inconsistent with state law, I think I've made that point tonight, and I would hope that, that we could move forward and that the board could act on the application with the understanding that certain things that the engineering department might prefer in an ideal world just simply, are inappropriate in this case. All I'm going to tell the engineering department is what I've said tonight, that these conditions that they're looking for just aren't appropriate and they're inconsistent with state law. And I think with that information, the board could move forward tonight and rule on that.
Yeah, but it's also the detail that you gave us earlier in terms of citing the case law already and the statute chapter and verse. So we rely on the material and recommendation from the CPW. So we do need to follow this process here, and as I've outlined earlier. Okay, I'm not necessarily going to entertain public comment right now.
This is a public hearing, and this is why I stayed, and I may not be present at the next public hearing, and I have a very short comment, please.
All right, Tanya, if it's short, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. It's about the tree protection section. I served on the tree preservation subcommittee, and also I think Matt was instrumental in developing the tree preservation bylaw. Clearly, that's not, that doesn't apply here. But one thing I learned was that there is a critical root zone of trees that need to be protected during construction that goes beyond just not cutting the roots, but actually protecting about 12 inches, anyway, for a foot or more per inch diameter around the root of the tree. And I was just wondering if that's being taken into consideration by the public works or by the contractor, and also how will it be enforced that the trees are in fact protected? Thanks, Linda. I appreciate it.
Ms. Mulroney, could you briefly answer that?
I would have to defer, I think, to Rob to see. Okay. I'm unaware of what trees are out there.
Okay.
So the main is proposed within the existing right-of-way of Route 126. In that area, most of the trees are located, I'd say, at least 10 to 15 feet off the right-of-way. So we're not aware of any roots based on some of the previous test pits we've done. So I think the potential for concern or impact is probably relatively minimal. But we could, review that as construction occurs to make sure there isn't an impact.
All right, thank you.
Also for our public works, I think, to keep track of this.
Yeah, it's in their conditions. So thank you, Tanya. Okay, any other comments from the public? If not, I'd like to hear a motion to close the public hearing.
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Okay, and will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Escobedo?
Aye.
Are we continuing the public hearing?
Yeah, I think we're
Sorry.
continuing the public hearing.
But we have to give a date.
Muted yourself again.
We need to move to continue to a date certain.
We need to move it to a specific date, I believe. Is that correct? Like the 23rd or some?
Yeah, I think if I could make a recommendation.
Yes.
So the 23rd, I would advocate for the 30th, only because we would want to have National Grid's comments give our engineering department, but also our council time to review their input as well, and just give us a little bit of time, especially since, like I said, this has been out there a while, so we want to give ourselves a little bit of time. So I would recommend the 30th.
If I could, respectfully request the week before. Again, this is a critical project, and the application's been with the town for literally months, and we've been, requesting to get in front of the board, and we finally did. So
Yeah, we hear your request, but I think we're going to have to go ahead with the 30th. I'm sorry, Mr. Waterfall. All right. Do I hear a motion to continue the public hearing to November 30th?
Move to continue the public hearing until November 30th.
Second.
Okay, will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Escobedo,
Aye.
Ms. Hotchkiss,
Aye.
Ms. Ackerman,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
and myself, Ms. Bates. Aye.
Okay, that's unanimous, and the chair so declares. We'll see you back here on November 30th. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to move quickly to the Minuteman Technical Regional High School playing field project and assessment. This is our second discussion, and there is a time constraint on the participants who are here to speak with us today. So I think we have Superintendent Boquillian, and we have Stephen Ledoux, our representative. So would you like to open up where we are now in terms of your discussion?
Okay.
You were going to, let me just say, thank you for agreeing to come back today. You were, after the last meeting, you were going to talk to some other communities and bring that feedback back to us, as well as you were bringing some additional information on the slides. So thank you.
Yeah, Matt had a question that I can get to in a second, but we've had quite a few meetings. This is the 4th of 8 meetings I have today. I have 3 left after this one. Arlington has approved it. Their FinCom is meeting tonight to formally approve it and send a letter to their select board regarding their approval. We're at Stowe. They're fine with it. Everyone we've talked to so far has been fine with it. After this meeting, I'm going into Acton again and to Lancaster. The Bolton town manager says his select board has been fine with it. So we've been getting a lot of good feedback. One of the things that Arlington asked us to do, or to be mindful of, I guess, because we're already intending to do it, was to make sure that the enterprise fund, as it's known in towns, or the revolving fund as we know it in a regional school district, is set up in such a way that any revenue from the fields and the asset would be applied towards the debt, as well as the capital replacement costs. And if there was any additional revenue after that, that be applied to operations and maintenance of the fields. So given the fact that COVID is upon us and may be for a while longer, it's hard to project what sort of revenue we would create a year from now. Hopefully things are different. But that intention and that commitment there to utilize the revenue to offset the debt and the capital replacement costs is certainly something the Finance Subcommittee and the Minuteman School Committee are mindful of.
So the communities that you've already spoken with, besides either their select board or FinCom approval or both, do they expect to go to town meeting?
No, none of them are planning to do that so far.
Yeah.
Mostly reason the costs, even for a virtual town meeting, would in some cases exceed the amount of money that's being discussed. And they feel the history of how Minuteman has run this project and such gives them comfort.
All right, thank you. Questions from the board? First, let me say, Stephen, did you want to add anything to that before we?
Yeah, I think, and I know it's been at a lot of meetings, I can tell. I mean, it's some precision on the wording here is important because it is kind of a counterintuitive thing where to approve, you do nothing. And so what we mean to say is other communities have endorsed this by making the decision to not call a special town meeting, not approving. And I think that's been, a local point of confusion here as well. It took me a second to get my head around it too.
Sure.
And then the other, so the other thing is, and I see Carrie is here, she did prepare an analysis for me that I'll share with the board after the meeting that lays out that essentially our assessment to the district for FY21 is $1.2 million, and about $350,000 of that is debt. And so adding 17,000 and change to that is a pretty nominal amount to complete, I think, what is a reasonably significant project. So, based on those factors and how it would really not have a material impact, I still continue to, and the fact that we are a part of a partnership with other communities that are supportive, my recommendation would continue to be to not call a special town meeting. And by virtue of not doing that, endorse the project. I don't know, Carrie, if you wanted to add any more.
Steve Ledoux, would you like to add anything else besides before we open it up to the other?
No, I just appreciate the town manager's comments, because I've gone through this before too, and it is counterintuitive, and it's hard for people to understand this. But I think for the board to endorse it and then not call a town meeting, I think is the prudent thing to do. And given the uptick in COVID, I'm not even sure how you do a town meeting indoors at this day and age. So I certainly would appreciate the board's following the town manager's recommendation on this.
Okay. Susan.
Yeah, I just had a question. Superintendent, you mentioned, I think it was Bolton, who got a recommendation from their finance committee to not go to town meeting. And this is not a question for you, it's a question for us. Was information solicited from our finance committee about this?
Susan, if I might, we are actually going in front of the FinCom Thursday night.
Oh, great. Thanks, Steve.
I should add, though, and I'm stepping on Carrie's toes a little bit here, but the funding for Minuteman VOC, including the funding we're talking about, is outside the guidelines that the FinCom normally works within. That's not to say that they shouldn't receive the information and share their thoughts on it. I just want to be clear from a structural standpoint.
But it's within the levy limit, though, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, other board members, let me see. Terry, yes, go ahead.
I just want to clarify, though, I believe it's up to the select board to call a town meeting or not call one. So we might take the recommendation of FinCom, but basically it's up to the select board to make that decision. Isn't that right?
That's correct. All right, Matt.
Yeah, so I had a question last time whether the town has ever done this before, and then used this kind of a decision process to authorize funding or to not disallow funding. And then secondly, I was interested in the outcome of the school committee meeting. And then thirdly, what Ms. LaFleur had to say.
So I don't know if Concord has done anything in this manner before, if you're asking me.
Yeah, I don't recall, but then I'd only go back so far, so.
It hasn't happened in my time with Minuteman in Concord. This is my 15th or so year.
Yeah.
We haven't ever asked. This is the first time I've ever asked.
No, every Minuteman funding I've ever seen came in front of town meeting, right?
Exactly, yeah. It's just the compressed time period and the situations, and it's not a small amount of money, but it's a relatively, when it's shared 9 different ways, it's relative. And your other question was?
Well, the school committee met and discussed this topic. I think it was for Stephen Ledoux.
My school committee, we haven't.
No, I thought it was Concord's regional school committee. No,
we did not.
Okay, sorry, I misunderstood. Your school committee.
The Minuteman school committee.
It wouldn't be relevant to, right, because it's theirs. Right. And then Ms. LaFleur, you had a presentation you were going to make regarding this funding? Or
Sure. The only things that I would mention that the town manager maybe hasn't mentioned so far is at $17,000 a year. The estimated impact at the median assessed value would be $2.30 per year. The town manager did mention, or somebody mentioned, the finance committee. I just suggesting as a courtesy, you may want to check in with the finance committee, but as you've heard, that is scheduled for this Thursday. I am not aware that the town has followed this process in the past, but I've certainly worked in other communities with regional school districts where this has come up and this process has been followed for small amounts like this. The way that this is proposed to be borrowed would be essentially the same way that the town of Concord would do a borrowing. If we were to borrow $2 million, we would borrow it for for a period of 10 years. So it is consistent with our own borrowing practices. I would just point out that this debt would be within the levy, and this is different than what we typically do with any district debt, including CCRSD. We in the past have excluded that debt or required it to be excluded. So we haven't in 100% of the cases. There was one small item with CCRSD. It was before I started, so I can't remember the exact nature of it. But typically we would require any debt of a district to be excluded. But certainly the small amount here that we're talking about, it really does not have any impact on our budget.
That was helpful. Thank you. Jane?
So, I mean, if I may be so bold, it would seem to me that to take the temperature is to say that the issue here is precedent, less the amount of money being spent. Is that fair, Carrie? Is that fair, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're making a capital expense for the town effectively of $173,000, which isn't nothing. I mean, it could buy lots of different things. And we're doing that without the consent of town meeting, which I don't recall us ever spending money without the consent of the citizens. So to me, it's a very irregular process. And while I understand that, I guess, there's really hardly any way around this right now, I have to say I'm not very pleased and not very comfortable with this precedent. But I also see that there is a procedure in place to do these kind of things.
Yeah. Other comments from the board? So if I may ask, is it, will you come back to us with an additional assessment a couple years from now, either for maintenance or?
No.
And how can you say that with assurance, given the difficulty in estimating the revenue at this point, given COVID and everything else?
Our district budget has a line item in it for maintenance and operations. As you can imagine, this year we don't have any sports in the fall. We don't have any sports in the winter time. I'm not anticipating much happening this spring. So it might carry over for next year through excess and deficiency. We might also be making through the school committee process a contribution to our stabilization fund, where those kinds of costs could come out of. We have to file, I think I mentioned it here, our revolving funds that we're allowed to have under regional school, we can only put money in from a certain asset, and only that money can be used towards that asset. So it's not like the revenue can be used for anything else. It has to be used for the asset that it's supporting.
All right, thank you.
Linda?
Is that Terry speaking?
Yes, you can't see me, I guess.
Yes. Okay.
I would definitely be in favor of the select board endorsing this. I'm not in favor of us calling a town meeting for many reasons. The amount is small enough, and the COVID situation being some of the big reasons. And I think Minuteman has a really good track record of coming in under budget on projects and never having to do this before. Now, if the finance committee disagrees, then I think that we should discuss this again. But I think in the meantime, we should have a motion tonight to endorse this project and not call a town meeting unless the FinCom disagrees.
Do we need any motion? Do we need, I mean, I think it's only if we objected that we would have to take a motion, and that would be to organize a special town meeting. I don't think that we have any action that we do take in any other respect.
You're right. We don't have to take an action.
I guess
We can do it that way because non-action means no town meeting. So we can do it that way if you want.
So a non-action actually means that Steve Ledoux would go to the meeting and vote as he chose, having heard the sentiment of the town, and that there would then assuming that this is endorsed by all of the communities, if we don't respond within, I believe it was 60 days for a town meeting, then it's assumed that we've approved it. I mean, that's how I understood the
yeah, that's correct, Linda. And I think some kind of like, we endorse this, even in a sort of non-binding way, could give the other communities a sign that we won't come back sometime between now and the end of the 60-day period and say, you know what, we changed our, we feel differently. But as Matt noted, and I agree, it's not necessary.
Correct. All right. How important is the endorsement here?
Madam Chair, I would suggest an endorsement because, frankly, I think one, you probably want it for your record, and two, I think as town manager just said, we're having a school committee meeting tomorrow night. We're going to be we are going to be voting on the debt, so it's certainly nice to know where every community stands at this point. So I would appreciate an endorsement vote.
All right. I would entertain a motion from the clerk for a non-binding endorsement of this project for Minuteman Tech as presented to us.
Move that the board make a non-binding endorsement for the Minuteman Fields project as presented to us. Am I to put pending select finance committee?
I think this is our endorsement.
Okay. All right, so it ends there.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Escobedo,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Nay.
Ms. Ackerman,
Aye.
Ms. Hotchkiss, you're muted. Aye. And myself, Ms. Bates, aye.
Okay, and that is a vote of 4 in favor and 1 opposed. Thank you, everyone. And thank you for being here today to present this information. I know there were several of you here for that purpose. Thank you.
Well, thanks. We appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to move next to the election follow-up. And I believe our town clerk is here.
I'm here.
And thank you so much for being here. At previous select board meetings, we certainly have sung your praises and that of your department, the Board of Registrars, and all the official poll workers who seemingly helped expedite this very busy election.
Marathon.
Yes, exactly. So thank you. And we're interested in hearing your update today.
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity and for the encouraging words throughout this process. It really has meant a lot. This really has been a marathon, and between town departments, the League of Women Voters, community groups, voters, election workers. It really takes a community to run an election like this. If I may share my screen, it's easier for some of this to be presented visually. To really, is that okay?
Yes, of course.
It's very brief. Thank you. I think I can do this. Let's see.
Jeremy, is she set up to share her screen? Yeah, it looks like it.
All right. Okay, so here's our timeline. As you can see, election, we used to plan a month in advance. This started in July, really, when we got the legislation passed for voting by mail, which was important in this COVID-19 climate. So the state took care of mailing out the vote by mail applications to every voter in the state. They did that twice. They did that July 15th for the state primary and also for the presidential election, as you all know. And then they did it again on September 15th. So as a result, we had a lot of people wondering if we had received their first application, if they were still, registered to vote. But so this is a long list. I'm not going to go through the entire list. I know that you have a lot of other things to cover, but this is what it felt like to us. It was a race to, manage more applications than we've ever seen coming in. We handle absentee ballot applications. Pat Clifford has always managed those, and we still had about 550 of those, but we've never seen a volume like this. And we got all those ballots mailed out. And then we had early voting in person, of course, and then the state primary. Following that, we had the town meeting, and then we were gearing up for the next big mailing of ballots. And of course, for presidential election, we always anticipate a higher turnout. So we had 8,000 ballots to mail in a week, following which we had, of course, early voting in person for 2 weeks, and then the presidential election. And then you could say we won the post-election audit lottery. And so that happened as well. And that was last Monday, as a matter of fact. So 8,000 ballots. Pat Clifford and Nate Smith in my office, they created a workflow with very little notice and trained election workers so that we had this amazing system of production set up to make sure that we had all the right labels on the ballot envelopes, the instructions, the ballots. We kept track, the control of knowing that we didn't mail more than one ballot out. It took hours and hours, and they pulled it off. There was so much energy happening in the office. It was really something. And then in the office, Arlene was answering calls because people then want to know, the whole track my ballot. And then later we had the online vote by mail application. So each new process that the state introduced led to a lot of phone calls. So that kept many of us busy, but mostly Arlene. And Kathy was doing a lot of the voter registration entry because we have automatic voter registration now. Anytime someone goes to the Registry of Motor Vehicles or any other agency, state agency, to make a change, they have the option of opting out of registering to vote. And if they don't opt out, they are automatically entered into our queue to process and see if it's a duplicate, if they're already registered. It's really added a lot to our workflow. And then we had Sally Williams, one of our election workers, in the office helping us to file all these voter registrations so that we could find them, which is really important. And so we were, and also deleting voters who are moving. All of these things happened through our central voter registry and kept us very busy. So once the ballots started coming in, we had to, and I say we, but really it was Anita who did a wonderful thing. She was the volunteer coordinator and had 3 weeks of coordinating for volunteers for 6 hours a day, from 10 to 2, 4 hours a day rather, for 3 weeks to go through and verify signatures, as well as sorting by precinct and alphabetically by last name, before we could actually scan in the voters, so that we knew we had, again, our control was the state system to make sure that we're not letting then someone vote in person who's already returned a ballot. In total, we had 9,300 voters, and Concord should be very proud of this. 70% of Concord's voters voted before November 3rd. And that was, and 2/3 of those voted by mail. And our total turnout, with the post-election audit, and also the post-election tabulation, which we did for all of those ballots that we received after 5 p.m. election day, and that were postmarked November 3rd and received by November 6th. So we now have a total of 87% voter turnout. And so to look at the numbers of early voting in person, for instance, because it's hard to compare things, the numbers between 2016 and 2020, since we didn't have really vote by mail the way we have it now. Early voting by mail was an option. It was rarely used in 2016. So when you look at 2020, 330 was the highest number we had on the first day of early voting this year. In 2016, you can see how different that trend is. We were up in, over 400 most days, and the last day was 800. So a very big difference in early voting. And that pre-election production is what really kept us very, very busy. Now I'm going to see how to stop sharing, and there, I think I've done that now. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. I will say that we did move to our temporary quarters at Harvey Wheeler Community Center, and our state system is not quite up and running yet. So that will be up and running on Wednesday. So I'm sorry I don't have more data to share with you, but I will be creating a more comprehensive report that uses the data from the state voter registry.
Thank you very much. A race indeed, but yes. A successful ending. Comments from or questions from the board?
Linda, it's Susan.
Yes.
Yes, Kari, thank you, and to everyone involved in this huge effort. And I just had a question about what your sense was about 87% turnout versus other elections, presidential, that you've observed, not necessarily here. Well, here, actually. It seems pretty high to me, but I don't know.
Well, Concord voters have always turned out in very high numbers for presidential elections. In 2016, I believe it was 85%.
Okay.
So the percentage is slightly higher. The other thing with the voter turnout is when we look at total voters, we include inactive voters. Not all inactive voters still live in Concord. We can't remove inactive voters from our voter list until 2 state elections have passed without their engaging in any voter activity. So it's probably a higher percentage than that. And I think just looking at the volume of people, it really feels like it was higher than 87%.
Thank you.
Which is astounding.
Yeah.
Jane.
First of all, I just wanted to echo Susan's and everyone else's thanks to Kari and to the incredible town team, both the town staff, as well as all of the volunteers. I'm always overwhelmed by the spirit of volunteerism in Concord. and it's inspired by the people who work for the town. So it's really, it leaves me a little quiet. One question I had, first of all, I mean, as always, I think our turnout is well, it also tells you what Concord is. We don't take anything lightly. I was wondering, I think I remembered hearing that at the mail-in levels, we were like the second highest early voting mail-in in the state. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
I mean, we got to add a little competition in there. So who beat us?
Who did?
Who beat us?
Eastham, I think.
Lexington.
Okay.
And Lexington, actually, we ended up number 3, I believe.
Number 3,
Yeah.
that's just not acceptable. But I am curious as to whether or not there's any discussion amongst town clerks or election representatives going forward, whether this voter, early mail-in voting is likely to change election processes. I mean, we've seen the national accounting and investigations on the elections come back with incredibly high praise for the efficiency and the quality of the election workers. Is there an anticipation that this will be sort of the precedent, taking COVID aside, that this is now the new norm?
Well, that's a good question. We're waiting to see what the legislature does, and I'm sure that will be based on the Elections Division recommendation, because people like voting by mail. They've liked voting by mail for a long time, and absentee voting, shows that. But we have to wait to see whether the legislation will extend beyond 2020. Right now, the legislation for voting by mail stops in 2020. On the one hand, I really hope that it continues because it's a convenience, but it felt like the procedures were coming out and they weren't really tested. So the volume of work that we had, and we still have other work to do. So it really became a challenge to clerks, I think, statewide, certainly. And we haven't had a chance to really catch our breath yet to talk about that, but I'm sure there will be a lot of conversations about that.
Well, depending on how the legislature votes, it'll be interesting to see how this is represented in next year's budget.
Yes. Yes, and I should say the vote by mail, the legislation that came through in early July is unfunded. So I'm sure that the auditor will be pursuing some reimbursement. We did get some grant funding. The state reimbursed for the ballot drop box. So there have been opportunities out there to get some of the expense refunded, but I'm hopeful that the auditor will look at this as, it's an essential expense because we have to have elections.
Carrie, I understand there was an audit this morning, and I'm wondering of the...
a week ago, yes.
A week ago, sorry.
Yeah.
Are you audited every presidential election, and do you have the results from that yet that are public?
Yes, so the audit is a random audit of 3% of the state's precincts. They literally put it in one of those lottery cranks that the elections director then selects, slips a paper out, and declares which precincts from which communities have been chosen. And Concord's precinct 2 was chosen. So we had, by last Tuesday, we had to have begun, and by tomorrow, we have to have the results to the state. So we conducted the post-election audit last Monday. It went from about 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. We had from the election results, and that included the overseas, the central tabulation, the precinct, all of those tallies. We had 2,775 ballots to tally in blocks of 50. So we ended up with about probably 63 blocks, because we also had write-in and hand-counted blocks of ballots as well. And what we found was we actually had 2,779 ballots to be tallied. So that was a difference of 4 or 1/10% of a difference. What we also found, and actually this was the post-audit, when I was preparing the report, I found an anomaly in one of the blocks of write-ins where on election night, there were a total of 13 write-in votes, 12 were for Dr. Shiva and 1 was for all other. And then in the audit, I think I did not give clear instruction to a pair that had started. We had a second shift that barely got started before we finished. And so they had put 13 of the write-in votes as all others. And I called the elections division about that. And the director, Michelle Tassinari, said to go with the election night tally for those results, because we can't go back into the ballots. And, 12 is a pretty large number to have attributed to one candidate to then have, all go to all other votes. So that was the only anomaly from it. But otherwise, it was very successful. We had social distancing. We had 10 pairs that were tallying, and they just went through one block after another with amazing speed. And I should also say that the tallies were only for the contested offices. So senator in Congress, president, and then one question. And it was question 1. So those were the 3 things that were tallied.
Thank you. Terry.
Yes, I don't have any questions, just your whole team, Kari, you guys, a tremendous amount of work and dedication. Just thank you to all of you.
Thank you. We love what we do. We really do.
Guess so. All right. If there are no other questions, I'm going to, yes, thank you so much, Carrie. And we look forward to your final reports and interesting ahead to see how the legislature is going to deal with this.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. All right. The next item is the community COVID-19 update from Public Health Director Susan Rask. Here's another town employee who has certainly been in the forefront for the entire year and brought important, reinforced important recognition of the role that public health services play in our communities. So welcome, Susan.
Thank you. So I'm Susan Rask. I'm the Public Health Director. And Stephen asked me to speak to you tonight about the situation sort of statewide and in Concord, and then some industry specific stuff and the governor's new guidance. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen if you don't mind.
Yep, please.
There we go. So this is the dashboard that I prepare for the community and send out on Friday every week that talks about the case counts and how many active cases we have in town and the average daily incidence rate per 100,000 and the test positivity rate, which are the metrics that we're mostly looking at. So for as of Friday the 13th, we had 10 active cases in town, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about that, with an average daily incidence rate of 3.8 and a test positivity rate of 0.49%. So what does that mean? Well, in September 3rd, we had an average daily incidence rate of 1.1 per 100,000. At the beginning of October, it was 1.5. So you can see it's up considerably since we started doing this dashboard. And our test positivity rate is a little bit up from what it used to be. And that the test positivity rate is the percentage of people who get tested who test positive. And you want that to be below 3%. So clearly Concord is, but you can see some other of our adjacent towns kind of edging up. And then the active cases I always send out because parents at the beginning of school had concerns about where are these cases? Are they among school children? Where are they? So we're trying to let people know sort of what age group they're falling in. So as of Friday, we had 6 sort of active cases. Today we have 9 because we had a few diagnosed over the weekend. So as of this morning, there are more childhood cases. We have 3 in the Concord Public Schools, 1 at Concord Children's Center, and 1 at Fenn. So we've added some cases over the weekend. And so having 9 active cases in total is the highest number we've had since September. And having this many in children is the highest number we've had since school started. So that's a little bit of concern. I mean, I'm sure you're all hearing that the case numbers are going up statewide. So this is sort of the metric that the state is now using to assign risk level. They changed it a couple of weeks ago. The new risk metrics better account for differences in population. So right now we're still in the gray, which is less than or equal to 10 total cases, which is good. This is the state has stopped producing the map. For those of you that used to see the old COVID dashboard, DPH was producing a map for a while. They've stopped when they changed the metric. But this is CVB-TV produces this map using DPH's data. And I think it's important to think about where are these cases happening. So the state actually releases data on COVID clusters by exposure setting type. And what I want to point out is a whole lot of disease transmission is happening in households, which is something that the governor has emphasized. You know, and we know it. I mean, you're living with, if somebody's positive, you're living with them, it's very likely you're going to become infected. But that really speaks to sort of holiday gatherings and other social gatherings, you know, when people are living in households and visiting other households. And so the other thing I wanted to point out is, you know, we've had 41 clusters that occurred in social gatherings with 115 cases coming out of that, which means that for every social gathering where there's a cluster, like 3 people are being diagnosed from that social gathering, and 600 and I can't quite see it because you're on top of it. 69 contacts had to be traced. But another sort of encouraging piece are the K-12 schools. We've had 43 clusters total in the state, but out of those 43 clusters, only 87 people have actually gotten sick, and we traced the state, or someone traced 229 contacts. So out of that, only 87 people got sick. And that's very reassuring that although we're having cases in the schools, we're not having a lot of transmission of the disease within the school. Like the little cluster of 1 or 2 is not magnifying into 5 or 10 kids. It's staying as a pretty small cluster. So I think that's good news. This is a little bit of the state data from April back to now, and these are incoming cases to the Community Tracing Collaborative. So you can see back in April, the incoming cases were quite high. We went way down over the summer, and you can see what the case numbers are doing again. And that's just the cases coming into the Community Tracing Collaborative. That's not the cases that are being investigated by the Board of Health. So I'm just showing you this to sort of illustrate what the curve is doing. Yeah. So the statewide picture, as I'm sure you've all heard, the case numbers are rising. On Friday or Thursday, there were 2,482 new cases diagnosed that day, compared to about 600 new cases a day in early October and 250 new cases a day in July. So you can see that things are deteriorating. And the state test positivity rate is now almost 3%, which is not good. The positivity rate is an indicator of, are you testing enough? And when it gets up around 3 or 5%, it means that more people are getting it than you can kind of keep up with testing. On Friday's call, the Department of Public Health is advising that the Community Tracing Collaborative, who follows some of the positive cases, may not be able to handle the increase in cases, and towns should start to think about bringing in additional resources to do case tracing in their own towns. And I will say right up front that we have a public health nurse, Tricia McGeen, who has done most of our case tracing, and that involves calling the positive case, finding out who their close contacts are, and quarantining the close contacts. And it's a very labor-intensive process. Tricia has done much of that, and she's done an incredibly good job. She hasn't gone the extra mile. She's gone the extra 10 miles. She's just been unbelievable, especially with the cases that have happened in the schools. So. But everybody is starting to feel a little overwhelmed by the rising case numbers. Governor Baker's considering reopening field hospitals, which is something he did in the spring. And he again emphasized that households and small informal gathering and some sports are sort of the foci of disease transmission. So where are we right now in Concord? We have 9 active cases for the week ending November 13th, including 5 cases at the schools and childcare facilities. We found out Thursday night that we have 90 inmates and 16 staff positive at MCI Concord. And due to the MCI cases, Concord is likely going to show up in the yellow risk category for the week that ends this Friday. We've had 13 cases in the Concord schools to date. We've had every week up until now, we've had 1 or 2 new cases in the public schools. This week it's 5 cases, so that's concerning. The good news is that none of the close contacts of these cases have become ill. So we have not had community spread of the disease in the schools, which is really reassuring that our schools can operate safely without spread of the disease. And I feel very good about that. And that's because Laurie Hunter and the school nurses and Tricia are just on every case that happens to get the contacts quarantined. And although our metrics are still good, we're not going to be immune to what's happening statewide. And I really have some concerns around pandemic fatigue. People are getting really tired of all these restrictions and lack of social life. The upcoming holidays where people are going to kind of socialize and get together with family and friends is of concern to me, as are the return of the many college students that will be coming back to Concord from all over the country and goodness knows where. And of course, are going to want to see their friends and socialize with their friends. So those are sort of what's on my radar for concerns. Then Stephen asked me to speak to you about restaurants and how those are operating. Restaurants are subject to industry-specific COVID safety guidance that the state puts out. Tables have to be maintained with a 6-foot distance from all other tables. The size of the party cannot exceed 10. You can seat people at the bar now, but only if they're having seated food service. So in effect, the bar acts as a table, not as a bar. And we've had a little bit of issue with that. And outdoor dining has to follow the same rules. So in terms of the 6 feet apart for the tables and all of that. So I know there's some questions about how long can restaurants maintain outdoor dining, and we can talk about that. But whatever they set up in tents outside still has to follow the same rules as the indoor. And then, of course, now due to the mandatory closing guidance, the restaurants have to close at 9:30 except for takeout. No alcohol can be served after 9:30. And, that's going to, Governor Baker in one of the last conferences I heard him speak at is, he has the stay-at-home order, and we'll talk about that in a moment. He really is trying to cut down on people socializing in advance of the holidays and with the holidays. So on November 6th, the governor issued the stay-at-home advisory, where all residents of Massachusetts are advised to stay home between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. And you're advised to only leave home to go to work or school or essential needs, and to not have gatherings in your home because of the concern with small informal gatherings. And then there's the mandatory closing period for certain businesses, which is really almost every business that the public would just sort of go to. And the gathering size limit has been dropped. So the gatherings at private residences has been dropped indoors to 10 people. We're in step 2 of phase 3 because we're a relatively low risk town. So 10 people in private residences, indoor gatherings at event venues is 25, outdoor gatherings at private residences is 25, and outdoor gatherings at event venues and in public settings is 100. So Governor Baker has made it much more restrictive. But of course, that does not apply to any sector that has its own COVID safety rules. So those are still following the rules that are industry specific to that industry. And then there's a new face covering mandate. Everyone has to wear a mask or face covering in public locations, even if no one is closer than 6 feet. And I think that is a good thing. It just makes no ambiguity to it. We've had problems, clusters associated with carpools, so now everybody has to wear a mask there. And all locations that hold any kind of events, you have to be masked. So that's kind of where we and the state are today, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Jane. Thank you, Susan.
Susan, thank you. I have the privilege of being the liaison to the Board of Public Health, so I get a second vantage point on how much is done in your offices, but I don't think any of us, you and the election officers, these are the two stalwarts of 2020. Not that anybody, opted for this particular choice. I don't think we can undersell what I heard in the mandatory mask everywhere, because as someone who bikes a lot and enjoys outdoor exercise and, has responsibilities, I haven't seen any real change in behaviors in various places that I am, especially outdoors. I don't think it's sunk in or has been broadcast widely enough that the outdoor exercise, especially exercise, but outdoor, that it's a mask on. It doesn't matter if you know your best friend and you've been walking every single day for 2 years. Now you're walking with mask on. And I appreciate how much of a pain in the neck or inconvenience or, I appreciate the imposition, but I just don't think people have really understood this. I don't think we're necessarily a community of scofflaw, but I do think people just don't understand it.
Okay, I will get more messaging out about that. I did get messaging out last week about the returning college students, which I hope people will take to heart, to get your kids tested when they come home and to really discourage them from just kind of casually hanging with groups of friends.
Susan, is there a local testing list? I mean, I know that there, especially for some families, it's important to know where they can do it for free, where they can do it easily, making access for that sort of thing as easy as possible or easily, discoverable as possible.
Yeah. So the free testing site is AFC Urgent Care in Marlborough.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
In line, you may have to wait, but it is free. AFC Urgent Care in Bedford, you make an appointment and it's the ID Now test, which is a fine test, and you get your results in 2 hours. You might have to wait a day or two to get an appointment, but you will get your results quickly. Emerson Hospital also has a drive-through site at 200 Baker Ave, but you need a doctor's orders to go. So I think parents that have returning kids could probably call their primary care physicians and ask for doctor's orders to get tested. Beyond that, there is a state website that was in the sort of press stuff that we put out, and you can go. I mean, there's many testing sites, and the state website talks about, you can click on each one and see what the testing requirements are.
Right. I don't want to make more work for you. I just think as a select or as a town, giving an easy go look here and you'll find a list of places, then it's up to families.
At the moment, I would kind of recommend that people not go to the CVS test sites because they're sending the test to Quest and we're having like a 7-day turnaround. Which is a little, 7 days is too long.
Yeah, the state has the test site list, and it does change from time to time. So I think, all those links are on our website, and so I would just, people should really go to the gatekeepers of that information to get the most accurate. Because if we had, a number of testing sites that we were kind of on top of locally, I think it would be a little bit different. But I think the fact is, to get if you don't have a doctor's order, the reality is you're driving out of town to get a test. Linda, can I say one more thing?
Sure.
I do want to pick up on something that Susan alluded to, and actually, Jane, I appreciate your comments on it. The one thing in my conversation with Dr. Hunter, they have done really a remarkable job managing the school year so far. And Concord and Concord Carlisle has not had to change their approach since they opened. And I know that that's in large part due to the contact tracing work that Tricia and Susan have been doing. And she said, Dr. Hunter said as much this morning. And so I do want to say that that's kind of an under the radar thing that they're putting tremendous effort into, that it's having a major impact, major positive impact on both the education of our students and the lives of those families who are able to have some semblance of normalcy with the school year. So I don't want that to get kind of undersold.
Other comments from the board? Thank you. Other comments from board members? Susan, you mentioned some difficulty with a couple of the vehicular or establishments that are also serving alcohol, it sounded like. Are you responding to some of these concerns when they're brought to your attention as opposed to doing proactive kind of monitoring?
Every complaint we get, and we get probably 4 or 5 a week, we go out and investigate.
Okay.
When the restaurants started reopening sort of July-ish, we actively went out to many of them to make sure that they were following the COVID safety guidance in terms of the table spacing and the sanitizing. And we've done that with many of the businesses. It's just, but it's, you know, there are COVID safety standards for every business that's out there, and we simply can't visit every business.
Yeah, of course not.
But we do investigate every complaint promptly to make sure that, you know, things are being done correctly.
Thank you. Well, if there's no other questions for Susan, I want to thank you and your staff and your Board of Health and everyone working on this and your continued vigilance. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. We know we're going to be in it for the long haul. We're trying so hard to keep the schools open. We're working closely with Laurie Hunter, and you know, I think that's our #1 goal, to keep the schools open. So, and Trish has just done a great job. You know, she's so good with the parents when their kids are quarantined and they're scared, and she talks to them, and they can email her and call her with questions. And we're trying to make a scary process as unscary as we can make it.
Well, thanks again for everything. Please convey our thanks to her as well.
I will. Thank you.
Okay. All right. I'm going to move on now to the next item, which is our committee nominations.
Excuse me. Nominate John Cooley of 80 Highland Street to the West Concord Advisory Committee for a term to expire on April 30th, 2023.
Okay, and committee appointments?
Move to appoint Susan O'Shea Folger of 72 Shore Drive and Jeff Parker of 315 Plainfield Road to the White Pond Advisory Committee for a term to expire on April 30th, 2023.
Second.
Okay, and will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Escobedo?
Aye.
Ms. Hotchkiss?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Ms. Ackerman?
Aye.
And myself, Ms. Bates? Aye.
Okay, that's unanimous, and the chair so declares. We're ready for committee liaison reports. Who would like to go first? Terry.
I will, very quick tonight. I had 2 meetings this week concerning the MBTA. Both, well, there was a public forum, the Forging Ahead, and then the advisory committee today. We met with the general manager. Basically, what Concord needs to know, as you've probably heard, the commuter rail ridership is only 13% of what it was pre-COVID. So in early 2021, the T is really forced to reduce the service. Their deficit is just too high. So they're going to cut down midday service, eliminate weekend service, and eliminate service after 9 p.m. And some of this will start to take effect in January, and some won't take effect until the spring. You can still watch, if you go to MBTA Forging Ahead, you can see the presentation. The only other thing I had this week was West Concord Junction Cultural District. And one of the really interesting things that's happening, as you probably know, Maynard Forbes will be retiring and closing the 5 and 10 store that he's operated for many, many decades. And he's done so much for the community. So the Cultural District is going to be working on some type of remembrance. Maybe these little round or square stickers that are going to go in his window. And so I'm going to be back to the select board with asking for help publicizing that whatever little remembrances people have that we can help put in the window. So I'll be back with more detail on that. That's it for my report.
Thank you. Matt?
Yeah, I'll follow up with the transportation related thing because I went to a meeting of Magic and it was themed on transportation issues this time. And so we went through the MBTA service reduction plan, but also talked about regional transportation projects, and the communities that were there identified a common need for workforce transportation, especially from Lowell and Framingham areas, so that, you know, there's really still a big need and there's still a gap, you know, in terms of initiatives. Another thing is that there was an initiative described called Landlines, and this is kind of a biking focused thing. There's a map related to it that's quite extensive that shows that it's attempting to interconnect all of the kind of bike trails and other paths that are in the region, and actually even nationwide. And it was interesting to both me and Marcia to see this map because it included some things in Concord that neither of us were aware of. So we're still trying to track down who the group was that filled in the blanks on this map. And also, you know, would love to try to make some progress on some of those some of them were dreams or glimmers of the eye kinds of initiatives, but still worth pursuing. Then the Public Ceremonies and Celebrations Committee, as we mentioned, you know, held their Veterans Day commemoration. I think it was a good success under the circumstances. And I just recommend people to see the 6+ minute video that was taken from there. There's a nice image of cannon fire at the end, very nice close-up shot. And just as well as, I think, a very respectful commemoration of our veterans. Then the Community Preservation Committee had its meeting of the last batch of interviews of applicants, and they were all historical preservation projects. Beyond the Emerson flagpole at Emerson Field, there was the Timothy Wheeler House that needs repairs and new roof, the Masonic Lodge that needs a new roof, and the Wright Tavern, which needs really a complete structural renovation. And a lot of debate and discussion of these historical projects. And there is a kind of a new update of that there is a historical preservation architect that's getting involved with Wright Tavern's project. So more to come now is that all of the projects now have been reviewed at the beginning, and now there's going to be starting that process of winnowing and figuring out how to fund either some or all of the projects to some degree. The funding requests do exceed the funding available by a considerable amount. The PEG Access Advisory Committee met. And I think the most significant thing there is that they voted to request that the town move ahead on the open education coordinator position that has not been filled. So, you know, this is a position that's open. Dr. Hunter has expressed support for filling this position. There's budget available, and the committee asks, I think more formally here, that the town move ahead with that hire. Then the committee volunteer subcommittee, if you will, we have a meeting coming up on Thursday, and we'll be discussing kind of the feedback that we got at the last select board meeting and hope to bring the next iteration back. And then finally, the Zoning Board of Appeals. What most significant thing there was, well, two very significant things that happened were first a accessory dwelling unit, a special permit application under the new bylaw that was just passed at town meeting. And so at 131 Hubbard Street, there's a carriage house that's going to now have a accessory dwelling in it. And so that went well. The other was that the 13B Commonwealth site, which is currently just a grass plot along Commonwealth in front of where Neshoba Brook Bakery is. A building was presented for a special permit at the ZBA. It's already been through the West Concord Advisory Committee and the Planning Board, and it's a 3-story building and with commercial space on the bottom. But the interesting thing is now the 8 units of housing have been added above for the 2nd and 3rd floors, and 2 of those units are at the 80% median income affordable level, and the others are planned to be rentals. So that means all 8 would qualify for our affordable housing inventory, which is really quite remarkable and great. And then the building itself references a historic building in West Concord called Association Hall. And so it really has, I think, come much closer to the hopes that the West Concord Advisory Committee and the West Concord Junction Cultural Committee have had about having a building with character, this kind of a landmark that has historical reference and meets affordable housing goals. So that's my report. There will be a joint meeting between the Planning Board and the ZBA in December to discuss bylaws of common interest, like the 2-family bylaw that's going to be proposed for next year, and also the implementation of the floor area ratio bylaw.
Thank you, Matt. Good to have a report out on some of the details, particularly from the ZBA. So thank you for that as it relates to, some of our town goals. Jane.
Thanks. And I just wanted to jump in here. I have a very short report, but I did want to just encourage Matt, maybe you can send some of the magic initiative ideas and that map over to Stephen, who's the chair of the Transportation Committee, so that we can put it on an agenda. I mean, that sounds like a perfect melding. I had one of my committees met last week, which means this week is heavy. And that was the Hugh Cargill Trust Committee. We went through the minutes and the treasurer's report for October. We're going into the tax relief and Hugh Cargill Trust fall appeal period. This is an off year, which means that we're only mailing to those who have already expressed an interest in the past. It's on an every 3-year cycle that we do a townwide mailing. But most of the meeting was spent talking about the acknowledged and known invisible need that exists in Concord that's only increasing, especially in COVID. And unfortunately, this is a population that is not as easily reached by Zoom, by internet, by many of the ways that we approach people. And so we were really brainstorming, how do we collect more access to this portion of the population, especially as we are heading into a tighter lockdown phase of quarantining, because this is a very vulnerable group. And the result of that was that the chair, Judy Terry, talked to Ginger Quarles and talked to Bonnie Wilbur. And she's taking a look at the significant resource guide that we have in our social services department of resources that Concord has available to those in need, and seeing if we can boil it down to a 1-page, 1-point access place for the most often often used resources. So that is underway. And as always, this is another example of one of Concord's deep pockets of volunteerism and of support. And it's impressive to see how much time and how much energy goes into thinking about other people, especially as we go into the holidays. Thanks.
Thank you, Jane. Susan, did you? Yes. Susan.
Yes. I have a few meetings, so this is my light week, I think. I went to the Conservation Coffee on the 10th, and Delia talked about the pollinator gardens that they're working on and the CPA projects. There were some other interesting comments by the attendees, and it did come up that the Conservation Restriction Stewardship Committee needs a member. So that's a heads up for anyone who's interested in the amazing conservation pieces that are that we have here in town. I went to the planning board. A lot of this it was an hour and 15-minute meeting. It wasn't their record, but it was up there. And there were three major projects. One was the 13B Com Ave, which Matt's already talked about. Another one was called Coldbrook Crossing, which is on Fitchburg Turnpike on the Sudbury-Concord line. That was continued, that hearing. It's there are parcels in Concord, but also in Sudbury, and the sticking point right now is that the route into it is from Sudbury, and there's something in the bylaw about there needing to be a road from Concord that enters the residences that are in Concord. So that's going to be talked about later. And then the last project was 1440 Main Street, where there are already houses up, and they're looking to put 16 homes on the remaining land. And there was a very lengthy discussion. The developers had done borings, and there's no ledge or bad or poor soils in there. It's a lot of sand. One of the issues is that they need to get the planning board approval for the grading that they do for the road. And so the planning board members had a lot of questions. Also, questions about trees, and that is a continuing conversation because of the impact of the extent of the grading for the project that the developer would like to do as a major impact on trees. Economic Vitality Committee, here is that document that we all got in the mail. It's beautiful. Visitor centers hours are going to be reduced to Friday to Sunday, 10 to 4, but Beth is going to be there. So if there's a need, she's available. A lot of positive feedback from the Saturday shopping. And the library is going to help scanning materials for the visitor center. And then the visitor center said they will display for free until the spring brochures from different organizations. So nonprofits, heads up on that. The tourism has been strong. And that's about it for that. Let's see, one more. Concord Historical Commission met on the 12th, and they talked about the Wright Tavern presentation, and they had concerns about, a few members had concerns about doing the infrastructure work, like specifically the beams in the roof, before they really knew what the building was going to be, before they had a vision. The other infrastructure work is the lally columns in the cellar, which it was hooked to the ceiling of the cellar, but not to the floor, and vice versa on the other one. So that's clearly not a safe issue, but there was a very vibrant, healthy conversation about that project. They reviewed the town council's amendments to the demolition delay bylaw and approve them. And update on 1710 Lowell Road, which is right on the border of Concord, Carlisle. And there are a couple interested buyers, so that was good news. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. I just had a couple here. I attended another meeting of the Financial Audit Committee. They basically looked at some administrative letters that are going to be sent to the select board for two recent audits that were done for CMLP and for the school system. I also attended the joint school committee meeting where a lot of time was spent on presentations by both students and committee teacher resource and probably advisors for some of the clubs that the students are involved in on cultural competency and anti-racism activities that the various groups are working on. A lot of planning has been done for the entire year, as well as some activities have already been implemented. And then the other thing that I'll note is that they reviewed a number of policies, which is their modus operandi in each year at this time, and approved policies for various issues, and also their 2021 school goals. And that is basically my report there. Miscellaneous correspondence, we did receive a couple more specific complaints about the use of Estabrook Trail, as well as abutter concerns regarding how communication is affecting them. And are there any public comments? Okay, seeing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Actually, I do have a comment, Linda.
I'm sorry, Mary. It's hard for me to see everybody on this.
I know. I'm sorry. I raised my hand.
Yes, please go ahead.
Thanks. My name is Mary Hartman. I live at 16 Concord Green. I'm the chair of the Finance Committee, but I'm speaking for myself. And I'd like to make a comment about the money that Minuteman is raising for its playing fields, the debt that it's going to issue. And my concern is the process that we're using, because we have a process that we follow before we issue debt or before we raise money. And for example, if the schools wanted to raise any amount of money, even a small amount of money, the process would be that it would be vetted by both the select board, the finance committee. There would be a hearing. It would go in front of town meeting. So we would get a lot of public feedback as far as whether we did in fact want to spend this money. But now we're dealing with something that's off cycle. Excuse me, sorry. We're dealing with something that's off cycle. So we're spending money by simply not doing anything. And that's, to me, is a bad precedent. And I guess we can do it, but I'm not so sure it's a good idea that we do it. What I don't understand is why this is off cycle. And I think I'm not sure we're getting a lot of community input, and I think we should before we spend any money, even a small amount of money. So thank you for listening.
Thank you for your comment, Mary. And we did note that they are scheduled to come before you at the FinCom meeting this week.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So
you have another public comment.
Okay, thank you.
My name is Diane Proctor, 57 Sudbury Road. I'm speaking for myself. Linda, there have been so many decisions being made, like the White Pond Advisory Committee and other things that are going on, particularly with the White Pond revisions and work, that are not necessarily in the absence of a newspaper that really gives us broad information, that is not necessarily well advertised. And I wonder if the board would be willing to take up as an agenda item a way beyond just mentioning something in a board meeting, to find ways to communicate to our community the kind of ongoing discussions that will be central to the way our community moves forward. I know during COVID it's very hard. This is not a criticism as much as a a recommendation that we sit back and really think about how to be, as a community, more effective in communicating the discourses that are going on. Not that anybody's doing them secretly. I'm not making any accusations by any stretch of the imagination, but I just think that the communication of these issues is important. And so I just, I wish we would talk about it and think about it. And I wish the board the select board would talk about it. So thank you very much for hearing that concern. I know, Stephen, that you've got a good website, but not everybody knows how to negotiate that website or to find things. They have to know they need to go there to find something. So I'm not sure how we do this, but I think it's important. That's all. Thank you for hearing that.
Thank you very much. It's an ongoing challenge for all of us and worthy of conversation, no doubt. All right. I'm going to check one more time here. Any other public comments? If not, now I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Okay. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Escobedo,
Aye.
Ms. Hotchkiss,
Aye.
Ms. Ackerman,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
and myself, Ms. Bates. Aye.
Thank you, everyone, for the good input tonight, and good night. Be safe.
You too.